Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the old master bather, Scott Bradfield, and we're going to do a few these are different from our normal episodes here, where I witter on aimlessly about some books I read in the bathtub. I'm going to in the next few weeks, I'm going to read some stories out loud from my new book, The Millennial's Guide to Death. I self-published this myself. Most of the stories were published in various magazines, which I can't remember. Delmarva Review and Year's Best Fantasy and Horror, the Milan Review, Caustic Frolic, The Moth, etc. And I sort of self-published this volume with my own design and so forth, just because I was sick of looking at all my books on the computer that I didn't know what to do with. So this is a bunch of stories I quite like, and I read one of the stories, one of the shortest stories, called "The Passion According to Mike," and that was way back, in like 3 years ago, like the 26th or 27th episode of this endless series. And some of my students were on Facebook, and they suggested I read some more of these out loud. And I said, "What the hell? I'm not doing anything. I'll read a few out loud." And I like reading these stories out loud since they're stories I like. By the time the story gets into a collection, I've read it so many times. Unless it's good, I'm not going to put it in there. So I've read these stories, each one of them, 100 times. And the bad ones I get sick of reading, and all the ones that last this long means I must like reading them, or I would not have published them. The first story I was going to read is called Hate Crime, and that's it. It's called Hate Crime. It's about the most horrible thing that a human being can do is commit a hate crime. Okay. For example, "I hate avocados," Drew Peterson testified at his hearing in Santa Monica Civil Court, shortly after being driven there in a mesh-windowed van from county jail. "I hate broccoli, snow peas, and anything green. I hate marmalade, two-party politics, movies featuring Joaquin Phoenix in either a major or supporting role, and motorcycles, especially the loud ones that go roaring past my bedroom in the middle of the night. Like most people, I'm a creature of unwelcome prejudices and often express them in a needlessly confrontational manner, which is why on the night of November 17th, when Ms. Estrella Dominique Sanchez, the lovely young woman currently sitting in the front row of this courtroom, brought me that tray of complimentary hors d'oeuvres at the Olive Garden, I probably sounded more belligerent than I wanted to sound. As she testified, I said something about how I hated Spanish almonds, and I urged her to please take them away. But I wasn't trying to disparage the Spanish people, or even Miss Sanchez. In fact, I didn't even know Miss Sanchez was Spanish until the police arrived to serve me with an official hate assault citation during dessert. So mea culpa, or as the kids say these days, my bad. And after extensive consultation with my lawyer, who couldn't be here on account of his son's soccer game, I'd like to throw myself on the mercy of the court and promise to never again utter bigoted, nationalistic statements about the sovereign nation of Spain or any of its provinces, including Gibraltar. And while I know this won't remedy my past behavior, perhaps it will help you see your way towards forgiving me, Miss Sanchez, even if I may never live long enough to forgive myself. It was Drew's first time in court, and he was impressed by the abundance of blonde veneer that covered everything. Chairs, desks, paneled walls, and paneled ceiling, even while the court officials didn't seem very impressed by him. In fact, many jury members were already slumped over half asleep in their chairs or noisily tapping messages into their cell phones. "Chingo tu madre!" shouted a husky-voiced man from the audience. "That means fuck you, mama!" shouted an equally husky-looking woman from the jury box. Drew tried not to betray any glance or expression that the jury might consider inappropriate. Instead, he looked up directly at the judge and realized for the first time that she was a not unattractive, middle-aged woman with dark skin, dark hair, and thickly dropleted eyelashes that reminded him of the gypsies in old black-and-white werewolf movies. The name on her black enamel desk card said, "Judge Ramirez presiding." And after taking a deep breath that seemed to expand her displeasure, she said, "Perhaps it's time we brought this hearing to a close, Mr. Peterson," as if she and Drew were the only people in the entire courtroom, "since I'm sure we both have places we'd rather be." The most depressing part of the whole experience, Drew told his wife that night, when she drove him home in their Toyota is that I don't even like the Olive Garden. I prefer Macaroni Grill, but they were closed for refurbishment. So now I've got this clunky police monitor latched to my ankle, and the itchy is driving me round the twist. I thought they'd just slap me on the wrist or something. Instead, they hit me with a whole goddamn year of home detention. Who knew? Deirdre was wearing a slender floral patterned print dress, a pale haze of blush, and cherry red lipstick, gazing out the windshield with an expression of distant solicitude, as if listening to a disembodied tale of woe on the dashboard radio. Then, at the next stop sign, she pulled over against the curb, turned, and touched Drew's shoulder with her unusually long, jade-colored fingernails. She resembled one of those astronaut wives who used to stand around Cape Canaveral before a moon launch. "Honey," she said softly, in a tone both affectionate and uninvolved, as if she were telling a dog not to jump on the furniture. "Please don't raise your voice with me. I know you're frustrated, but remember what the judge advised about placing limits on your hostile behavior patterns. Because if there's one thing I don't want to do ever again, it's to stand bravely by you in a court of law." For several weeks, Drew hung around the living room watching Nazi documentaries on the History Channel, shopping for second-hand DVD box sets online, and preparing snacks of pita bread, hummus, peeled carrots, and celery stalks for his children when they arrived home from school. Drew's favorite part about being a dad was preparing nutritious snacks for his children, but his least favorite part was trying to answer all their mid-snack questions about his current legal predicament. "Dad, why do you hate Spanish people? Is it because they're swarthy? Or is it that annoying accent of theirs, like somebody clipped off the tip of their tongue with a pair of pliers? I don't personally have any bad feelings about Spanish people, but I'm perfectly prepared to develop some. My teacher, Mrs. Rogerson, said that parents who encourage hostile behavior patterns in their children should be exterminated, but only metaphorically, since capital punishment is wrong. Do you think capital punishment is wrong, Dad? Or should we only use capital punishment to control the Spanish people who, as I think we agree, are causing nothing but trouble in our American language-oriented society?" Drew's son, Felix, always spoke quickly and vigorously, as if he was racing himself to the end of each sentence. Meanwhile, his daughter Felicia took the opportunity to devour every scrap of pita bread in sight. "I don't hate Spanish people, Daddy," she said, running her nail-bitten finger around the rim of her lips to gather up the last grainy bits of hummus. "But I do hate a girl named Monica in my gym class who has really dark hair and whiskers. Would that suggest I'm heading towards sociopathic criminal behavior like you, Daddy? Or would the government allow me to hate Monica just a little bit, so long as I don't violate her socio-cultural space?" In the 4th week of home detention, Drew was fired from his teaching position at Madison Elementary and acquired a part-time job in customer service at Flambeau Financial Securities, an online investment firm located, or so they claimed, somewhere in the Midwest. FFS paid him an hourly rate even lower than his lawn mowing job back in high school. Not that Drew complained. "I'm just glad to get my foot back on the employment ladder," he told his wife one night in bed, while she lay beside him pretending to be asleep. "And I don't care what kind of employment either. I'll take any goddamn ladder I can get." Every morning he fixed himself a cup of instant coffee and sat down in front of the living room computer wearing a mouthpiece and headphone device pilfered from his son's Xbox. Then, clicking on the icon for Flambeau Financial Investment Labs, he awaited his first caller. "Hi there, Mr. Montali of 33 Pine Grove Drive. My name is Drew Peterson, and before saying another word, may I please read a brief disclaimer prepared by the California State Board of Social Safety. It goes like this. Greetings, potential customer. I am currently serving home detention for a Grade 3 level act of social hostility, and while I have openly repented my actions as required by my plea agreement, I still suffer from unpleasant behavior patterns instilled by decades of poor self-management. If at any moment you feel threatened by my behavior, please contact the CSBSS number located at the bottom of this screen. Now, may I ask, are you prepared for the imminent financial catastrophe facing our American way of life? If not, perhaps you would be interested in speaking with one of our highly trained capital investment advisors. Mr. Montali? Hello? Are you still there? But of course, most customers hung up long before Drew had finished reading his personal disclaimer. And if they didn't hang up, they usually exhibited some pretty hostile behavior patterns of their own. Weeks of home detention stretched into months, and Drew did everything he could to convince his family and himself that he had learned from his mistakes. He applied for and was granted a day pass to attend a self-awareness seminar at his son's school. He earned a 3-month clear button at his hostility abuse clinic for eliminating negative tones from his conversational register, and after every meal he recited the "Why I Don't Hate Anything" prayer into the recording mouthpiece of his detention monitor. Please, Lord, help me accept the limitations of who I am, and patient enough to endure the limitations of everyone else, kind enough to reprioritize my love-anger dichotomies, and wise enough to accept the deeply fallible person I have always been. At the conclusion of each prayer, Drew tasted a faint numbness at the roof of his mouth, as if the words were coated with a thin anodyne. He only hoped that the numbness would eventually spread into his brain where, he admitted in his darkest hours, he still harbored feelings of unrelenting anger at the world that had betrayed him. Many of you suffer from deep-seated hostility patterns that you don't even know you suffer from, Dr. Marigold told Drew and his fellow home detention inmates during the Finding Your Way Back to Polite Society seminar that was held every Wednesday evening at Skyline Community College. You spend your lives thinking, hey, I'm no different from everybody else. People like me and I like people. And so you continue journeying through life unaware of your deeply vile nature. Until, of course, the day comes when that nature is triggered into action by circumstances beyond your control. Dr. Marigold wore faded, freshly laundered jeans, a beaded cotton halter top, combed back, glistening raven black hair, and big, squarish pink glasses like a sexy librarian in a Disney movie. Let's take you, Drew, Dr. Marigold said, sliding her pear-shaped bottom onto the edge of Drew's desk. On the surface, you seem like a nice man. You dress okay. You have decent oral hygiene. You trim your nails and display good manners. If anybody met you, Drew, they would probably conclude, hey, he's no rocket scientist, and he's no Rock Hudson in the looks department, but he doesn't endanger our notions of social order. He's the sort of average, inoffensive boob you meet every day. And that, of course, is where they would be wrong. Dr. Marigold's formidable attention was making Drew feel a little woozy. A cold fist of unease formed in his stomach. His ankle bracelet was heating up, exerting a faint fibrillation. It was as if the ankle bracelet had detected where this conversation was going before Drew did. Dr. Marigold turned and removed her glistening black Michael Kors handbag from the podium. Her nylon knees flashed with reflected fluorescent light. She smelled like peppermint-flavored Tic Tacs. But now let's imagine a different case scenario, Dr. Marigold continued, reaching into her bag and removing something in her loosely clenched fist, like an amateur magician palming a pea. One which might reveal Drew Peterson for the person he really is. In this case scenario, Drew Peterson goes strolling down the street of any town, USA. He smiles at every person he meets and opens doors for old ladies. Suddenly, without warning, Mr. Nice Guy sees a convenient restaurant and goes inside. A sultry, dark-haired waitress brings him a menu, and everything is perfectly hunky-dory until the hors d'oeuvres arrive, when Drew comes face to face with a secret of himself that he never understood until now. At which point, Dr. Marigold presented her pretty pink fist to Drew, turned it over, and slowly uncurled the anemone-like fingers to reveal the cleanest, whitest, most perfect example of a Spanish almond that Drew had ever seen. So what did you do then? His classmate, Imra Goldsworthy, asked a few weeks later, after too many celebratory beers at the Olive Garden. Imra was overweight, sweaty, and wore humorous T-shirts that were never funny or even comprehensible to Drew. Tonight it was a blue tank top featuring a pair of sparkly, short-fused dynamite sticks, rolling their wide eyes over the electrified caption, and long may she blast. Well, Drew said slowly, feeling the story emerge from his throat like a slow bubble of lava from an expiring volcano. At first I didn't know what to say. I felt this flash of rage and anxiety. Tears rushed to my face. For a moment I thought I was having a heart attack. There I was, almost finished paying my debt to society, when suddenly this rage management instructor is sticking a Spanish almond in my face. How do you prepare yourself for that? And suddenly I remembered all those things they teach you in the anger rehabilitation manuals. Take a deep breath, let it out. Send your anger to the moon. Deep breath, take it out. Send your anger to the moon. I sat there listening to that reasonable inner voice for what seemed several hours, but it was probably only a few seconds. Because when I smiled up at Dr. Marigold, she smiled right back. And without thinking twice, I took that Spanish almond gently from Dr. Marigold's small, soft, sexy hand, placed it between my front teeth, and bit it in two. It felt like biting off the head of a small animal. It made me feel like I had just been born. That night, Drew brought groceries home from Albertsons, sat in the living room recliner, and read the paper while his wife cooked. Then, after dinner, he took an ambitious, spur-of-the-moment stroll down to the Stop and Shop for a pack of cigarettes. It was the first spur-of-the-moment stroll he had taken since his conviction, and his first cigarette since college. Each long, sandy drag from the Marlboro felt more exhilarating than freedom. If I'm ever diagnosed with a fatal disease, he thought, I'm definitely going to start smoking again. The streets were fragrant with flowers and trees that Drew couldn't identify, even though he had been living among them since his children were born. It made him wary of crushing out his Salem in the gutter or flicking it into the street. What if the trees and flowers are watching? He thought weirdly. What if they report back to my wife? These days he was ready for anything except, of course, for what actually happened. Closing the front door softly, he reached for a breath mint from the Chinese porcelain bowl on the hall table and heard his wife's thin, distraught voice in the kitchen. Hello, is this 12th Street Division? I'd like to report my husband smoking on the front porch of our home at 99 Maple Leaf Drive. Yes, a third-degree toxic abasement if I ever saw one. Of course I'll hold. Just please don't leave me alone. I can already hear him in the house. He's getting closer. It's not me I'm worried about. It's the children. It was the one thing Drew hated with more fury than any stupid Spanish almond. The goddamn cops. And they were headed his way. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too distressing for people. Hate crime. Yeah, and there's the book. I'm going to do a couple more of these. Okay, take care.